Hello and welcome to this series, Creating Sports Graphics with Boris Continuum. My name is Ben Brownlee from Boris Effects, and I am going to be taking you through the processes that we're going to be using to create this sports graphic right here out of some very humble beginnings. Now in this first part, what we're going to be doing is creating our initial shapes in Adobe Illustrator. Then we're going to be taking those into Title Studio and starting to create our animation. Now we are going to be using After Effects as a host, but actually the thing about using Title Studio and Continuum for doing this project is that it is host agnostic. Could be doing this in Adobe Premiere or DaVinci Resolve or Avid or any of the hosts that support the Continuum plugins. But in this case, we're going to be using Adobe After Effects mainly, but bouncing around some of the other Creative Cloud tools as well. So without any further ado, let's get on to creating our sports graphic. Okay, so here we are in After Effects, and this is a close-up of what we're going to be making in the next few lessons. And this is going to have some very unassuming starts. So what we're going to begin with is creating the shapes that we're going to need to make up these rings. And because I want the flexibility of vector shapes, we're going to pop into Illustrator and create those here. So in Illustrator, I have created up some rings. Let's just take a look at these. I've got my inner ring here. I've got an outer ring, and the rings go out and out and out. And all these rings are, if we have a look at this one here, this ring 2 here, what I've got in this one is actually 2 ellipses. I've got a small one, which is the same size as the previous ring, and then I've got one that's slightly bigger. And what I'm going to do is just have these 2 selected, come up to Object and go Compound Path, Create. And that's what is going to give me my little ring here. I've also got just a flat whole circle here. This is the same size as this green one, but without the ring cut out. Maybe I'm going to use that a little bit later to have another background on. Just gives me a little bit of flexibility to have it at this stage as well. All right, so what I'm going to do now is export all of these out so that we can use them in Title Studio. But the first thing I'm going to do is actually just get rid of all the color. I don't want any of the colors here. So I'm just going to select all. So I'm just going to Control or Apple A just to select all there. And I'm going to come down to my colors, my fill, double click, and I'm just going to make this a nice white. There we go. And we'll see why in, I think, part 4, maybe part 5, when we come to texturing these up. So the first thing I'm going to do is try and export these out so that Title Studio can now read them. And we have to export these in a particular way. So if I just save these, so if I come into the right folder, come into Illustrator, and I'll just call these circles white. There we go. Yep, that's fine. And if we save these out like this, Title Studio might not read things correctly. To make sure we're getting out exactly what we want, we actually have to save these out as EPS files. Let's come over here. I've got one that's called EPS, but I'm going to call this one EPS Ben so that I have a separate folder for these ones here. And let's take this out, ring 1. Save that here. And I'm going to need to save it out as Illustrator 8 EPS, just to make sure that we're going to be completely compatible when we take this into Title Studio. Then I want to get rid of all the hidden ones here. There we go, and just save that out there. And I'm going to want to repeat that for the rest of the layers as well, so we only have the layer that we want out there. So it can be a bit tedious. What I'm going to do instead, though, is I've got a script that makes things a whole lot easier. To take this stuff out of Illustrator. And it's actually a script by Andy Wiz. The only thing I've actually done to it is translate some of the alerts into English from German. And I've made sure that on, where are we here? Yep, line 82, I've taken the compatibility to Illustrator 8. Everything else is just as it is in the script. And I'm going to leave a link down in the description file where you can grab that if you want it. All right, so now I've got my circles white here. Let's come in and go to my scripts. Let's go other scripts. and I will find my folder, AI scripts, and export layers EPS. Hit OK on that. Only one document may be open, close all other documents. There we go. That would have been in German otherwise. And let's just run that script again. First save the original, the layers will be saved in the same folder as your file. Yes. Boom, boom, boom. And I think we can all agree that that is a lot easier than going and doing that separately. All right, so let's take a look at our folder for it. So in my Illustrator folder, I've got all of these EPS ones with files named after the layer name. So I can cut those. I'm going to come into my EPS bin. Let's get rid of that one as well. Don't want that. And let's just paste these in so that we know where they are living. There we go. Cool. So with that done, we can come back into our host, which is in this case After Effects, and let's start to bring those into Title Studio. So in After Effects, I'm going to create a new composition. I'm going to make this 10 seconds long. I will call this one Ring Animation 01. Hit OK on that. I'm going to create a new solid. There's the comp size. And I will call this one Rings Title Studio. It's going to be more than the rings soon, but we'll call this one Rings Title Studio. And let's come into Title Studio. So I'm going to go to BCC, 3D Objects, Title Studio here. And if you haven't used Title Studio before, if we just come into the effects browser, we can see actually there's like a ton of presets that we have available to us that gives you a sort of idea of the type of things that we can do in Title Studio. We're not going to use a preset. We're going to build everything from scratch here, but it's worth, if you haven't really explored it too much, just take a look at some of the presets and explore away with those. We're not going to do that. We're going to come in and launch the UI. And here is the Title Studio interface with Boris FX text coming in as default. We can move that around in the viewer, in the composite window. Move around using the screens here. And we've got a control window in the top left and the timeline at the bottom. So let's just come in and we'll delete the default text that we have in there. So now all we have is our 2D composite scene. We'll come back to what this means later. It's fine. And let's just add in that media that we had previously. So I'm going to go add new media and I'm going to come to EPS file. And I'm going to find my EPS file. So I'm going to find EPS bin, come to my ring 1, add my EPS file, ring 2, EPS file, ring 3, and so on and so forth. Okay, and what you'll see, well, you'll see a couple of things. What you see is that we've built on top of each other. So we've added the larger rings on top of the smaller rings. We're kind of blocking out some of them. So ring 4 is actually like a big ring that we don't need. In fact, we're going to get rid of a lot of these rings soon. But the other thing you'll see is that we are quite close to these rings here. So I'm going to come up to my viewer and I'm going to go fit to 100%. There we go. And that will just scale those in, zoom those in for us. So now we're left with 3 rings, 4 rings. So if I turn off visibility on all the others, on all the rings actually, and we have our center ring, which is ring 1, and ring 2, ring 3, ring 4. Now, ring 1, we're actually just going to use as a placeholder. We're not even going to do anything interesting with this ring 1. We're going to replace that with our ball a little bit later. So we're just going to concentrate and focus on what's happening on rings 2, 3, and 5. And we're just going to add a little bit of animation to them. So let's come into my controls. So the controls up here are contextual. So as we select these different layers here, you'll see that the type of controls that we have available to us will update depending on what we have selected. But something that's common with them is we have position, XYZ, scale, master scale, XYZ, and rotation, XYZ as well. So I'm just going to focus on animating up the first ring here. And I'm going to do something rather simple. I'm just going to come over on my timeline a little bit, maybe about half a second in. You can see the time. You either sort of see the time on the ruler down here, or you can see it up in the viewer here. And I'm just going to add a keyframe. And I'm going to add a keyframe in my position Z. And I'll choose what type of keyframe I'm going to add. Let's add an ease in, ease out. Come to the start. And I can add another keyframe in here, ease in, ease out. And just scale, or just reposition this so it's outside of the view of the camera. About minus 3,200 something. That should be all right. So just play that back. Ooh, look at that. Fancy. Very, very fancy. It's coming in. It's not that fancy. We're going to do fancier stuff. And we're also going to spin this in as well. Now, if I don't want to keep adding keyframes manually, I can always just turn on auto animate down in the viewer here, which is exactly what I'm going to do. So let's come in and have it so that once it comes in, which direction should we have this going? Let's have it going there. So we'll take it there, and then right at the very end, I'm going to have it going around about there. So 10 to 40, all right. So that means as it spins in, we want to spin in counterclockwise. So we're going to, it's going to spin in clockwise. So we're going to have this go minus something large, minus 180 there. And that should just give a little spin as it comes in there. Might be a bit tricky to see because it's not hitting the light all the time. But that should be all right. And then just as it fades back, just spins back a little bit there. Cool, happy with that. I can change my view range as well, so I'm not previewing the whole thing on the timeline, just going to preview the first 3 seconds of that. There we go, so far so good, so easy. Let's come to our second ring, and I'm going to have this starting a few frames in, and we're going to do a pretty similar thing. So let's turn on visibility on it. And this time, I'm going to have it, well, we will want to have a ease in, ease out on the Z there, and we're going to have it rotating the other way. So that takes us to about minus 10, minus 5 there, all the way to the end. That's about minus 17, minus 20, round about there. We're going to change this up anyway at some point, so it's fine. Oh, do you know what I did? I had my keyframe selected down the bottom there. Yeah, if you have your keyframe selected on the timeline, it doesn't matter where you are on the timeline, it will just affect the value there. So that's why we weren't seeing the animation that I was expecting. There we go, seeing a bit more animation. What I'm going to do is make sure that I've got nothing selected. Just click anywhere in the grey here, got nothing selected. Just animate up. Position Z again. So add another keyframe there. Have this one here, and we'll take this back out again. What was that? Minus 2,000 something around about there. Let's just readjust that Z position. Maybe instead of ease in, ease out, I will just have this decelerating, and this first one, let's set that to linear instead. There we go, that's giving me a better look. Change the timing on that just by dragging it. Boom, boom. Yep, cool. And we're still rotating, Good. Let's do the final ring, which is the ring up here. Do exactly the same thing. I've got my auto animate on here. Actually, remember to turn the ring on. So let's get it so it's just out of view. About minus 1,000 something. Make sure nothing's selected down there. Bring that in. Take this one back to 0. Decelerating. And we'll pivot this one, or spin this one back again. About plus +7. There we are. Come over here. Spinning a bit more. +18. Come back to our first frame. -100 and something. 180 something. Oh yeah, actually we didn't spin this one in because we couldn't see it. So let's take this one back in as well. -160 something. There we go. Let's take a little look. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, cool. All right. Okay, let's hit apply. See what we've got now. So let's bring it back into our host. Bring it back in. That's rendering out and that's looking interesting. It's not looking right. And we've definitely got quite a nice spin going on there, which we might want to tweak out, but it's got us somewhere. And I think that's the important bit for this beginning exercise. So far, we've set up our rings in Illustrator. We have exported those out and we've brought them into Title Studio and we have started our initial animation. So far, so good, so easy. There's still a little way to go. As you can see, our objects are still very flat. We're going to change that up. They're not very interesting or dynamic. We're going to change that up as well. But we're going to take a little break now. But when we come back, we're going to take these flat planes into actual 3D objects that interact with each other properly in 3D space, which they're definitely not doing now. And that's coming up in part 2 of Sports Graphics with Boris Continuum. And I will see you there. Thanks for watching, and be sure to go to borisfx.com to download a free trial of Boris Continuum so you can try this out yourselves. If you want to see more of this type of tutorial, be sure to leave a comment below. Also, subscribe to the Boris YouTube channel to stay up to date with the latest information and training materials on all the Boris FX products.